My brother Kyle died on September 15th, and I gave the eulogy, and it was good. I want to say that clearly at the start because everything that follows depends on you understanding that I was good at this, at the grieving. I don't mean I was performing. I want to be careful about that word because I've spent 4 months now questioning every word I use about this. I mean that when Kyle died, I was the one who held the family together. I made the calls. I picked the casket. I chose the photograph for the program. Him at 26, on the porch at the lake house, mid-laugh, the light doing something generous to his face. I stood at the front of a room full of people, and I spoke about my brother for 11 minutes without notes. And when I finished, Kyle's college roommate told me it was the best eulogy he'd ever heard. And I said, thank you. And I meant it, and I did not think there was anything wrong with meaning it. Kyle was 31. I'm 34. We grew up in Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania. Greensburg, specifically, the kind of mid-sized town where everyone knows which family you belong to, and the belonging is the main thing. Kyle and I were the Brannick kids. Our parents are still in the house on Maple Drive. Dad teaches history at the middle school. Mom manages the office at a dental practice. We are a known quantity. When Kyle died, car accident, Route 30 east of Latrobe, a Tuesday afternoon, nothing dramatic. Just a truck that drifted and a Civic that didn't have anywhere to go. The town responded the way towns respond. Food on the porch, cards in the mailbox. The Greensburg Tribune-Review ran a small obituary that I wrote. They through the funeral home on Main Street handled everything with the competence of people who have been burying Westmoreland County's children for 80 years. And I handled everything else. I created a memorial page on social media. I posted photographs. Kyle and me as kids. Kyle at his college graduation. Kyle with the dog. Kyle at Thanksgiving. I wrote captions. I wrote long ones. I wrote about what Kyle meant to our family, about his laugh, about the way he could fix anything mechanical, about the time he drove 3 hours in a snowstorm to help me move out of an apartment after a breakup. I wrote about him every week for the first 2 months, then every other week, and the posts got hundreds of responses. Hearts, comments, people sharing their own Kyle stories, people telling me how much my words meant to them. I organized a memorial fund. I organized a tree planting at the park where we played as kids. I spoke at the 3-month gathering that our church held. I was the person who answered when someone asked, "How's the family doing?" I was the person who knew how the family was doing because I had made it my job to know. I was the Brannick who grieved. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand the architecture before I describe what demolished it. I was not play acting. I loved my brother. I was devastated by his death. The things I did, the poesedum, the posts, the fund, the eulogy, came from real pain. But real pain can still have a shape, and the shape can become a structure, and the structure can become a role, and the role can become the thing you are instead of the thing you feel. I didn't know this at the time. I know it now because a phone taught me. And Kyle's phone was returned to my parents by the police, along with his other personal effects. Wallet, keys, a thermos that survived the accident without a dent, which my mother has placed on the kitchen shelf and will not move. The phone screen was cracked, but it still functioned. My parents couldn't bear to open it. My father put it in the drawer of the hall table, and it sat there for 2 months. In November, I took it. I told my parents I wanted to make sure there wasn't anything on it that needed handling. bills set to autopay, subscriptions, accounts that should be closed. This was true. It was also true that I wanted to hear my brother's voice. I am not going to describe what it feels like to unlock a dead person's phone with the passcode, because he never changed it from the year of his birth. And I am not going to describe scrolling through the text messages, the last one sent 40 minutes before the accident, to a contact named Dara, running about 20 minutes late, stuck behind a school bus. I am not going to describe the photographs. You already know what that feels like, or you can imagine it, and anything I write will either be less than the reality or a performance of the reality, and I am trying very hard now not to perform. What I need to tell you about is the voice notes. Kyle's phone had a voice memo app. Not one he downloaded. The native app that comes with the phone, the one most people forget, is there. Kyle had not forgotten. The app contained 143 voice notes, recorded over a span of approximately 18 months, from March of the previous year to the week of his death. And I didn't know Kyle recorded voice notes. In all our conversations, and we talked regularly every week or two, sometimes more, he never mentioned it. This is the first thing the voice notes taught me. My brother had a practice I didn't know about. 143 recordings, some a minute long, some 15 minutes, made in his car, in his apartment, on walks, at his workbench. I could tell the locations by the ambient sound, and I had no idea they existed. I started listening from the beginning. March 14th. Kyle's voice, close to the microphone, a little flat in the way that voices get when someone is talking to themselves and hasn't warmed up to it yet. Okay. Dara said I should try this. She said talking to yourself isn't crazy, it's just thinking out loud, and I think out loud better than I think quiet, so here I am. And talking to my phone in my car in the parking lot at work like a person who has his life figured out. He laughed, a small laugh. The laugh of a person alone. Dara. The same name as the last text message. I knew about Dara. Kyle had mentioned her a few times. A friend from work, I thought. Maybe more than a friend. He was vague. I didn't push. This is something I would have told you before the voice notes, was respect for his privacy. I would have said, Kyle was private, and I honored that. The voice notes taught me a different word for it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The early recordings were scattered and formless. Kyle talking about his day at the shop. He was an HVAC technician, good at it. The kind of person who understood systems intuitively and could diagnose a compressor failure by listening. He talked about jobs he'd done, problems he'd solved, a customer who asked him to look at a furnace from 1974, and his admiration for the engineering. He talked about a book he was reading about the history of refrigeration. He talked about a trail he'd hiked with Dara in Ohiopyle State Park. I listened to these in November and December, a few each night, lying in bed in my apartment in Pittsburgh, and what I felt was warmth. My brother's voice, his cadence, the way he started most recordings with okay, as though he were giving himself permission. The way he described mechanical systems with a precision that I recognized as love, even though he would never have used that word. Around recording 30, something shifted. Kyle started talking about our family. Not in the way you talk about your family to other people, the curated version, the anecdotes, the shorthand. He talked about us the way you talk when you're trying to understand something, trying to figure it out. I was at Mom and Dad's for dinner on Sunday, and Claire was there, and she did the thing she does where she tells a story about me. And the story is about her. Like, I fixed the garbage disposal last month, right? And she's telling Mom about it. And the story isn't about me fixing the disposal. The story is about, how she called me to come fix it, and how she knew I'd come right away because that's what we do, the Brannick kids, we show up for each other. And I'm sitting there thinking, she's not wrong. I did show up. But the reason I showed up is she called at 9 on a Tuesday and I wasn't doing anything, and it's a 15-minute job. And Claire's version has this whole weight to it, this significance. He just, like, me fixing a garbage disposal is evidence of the family bond. And I can't say, Claire, it's a garbage disposal, because then I'm the one who doesn't value the family bond. Claire is me. My full name is Claire Brannick. I stopped the recording when I heard this, and I sat in the dark in my apartment, and I felt something I'm going to describe honestly. I felt annoyed. Specifically, I felt the annoyance of hearing yourself described by someone who has gotten the details right and the meaning wrong. I did tell that story. It was a good story. It was about showing up. Kyle did show up. What was wrong with saying so? I kept listening. Recording 34. Kyle is in his apartment. I can hear the hum of his refrigerator, which I now know is a sound I will never be able to hear again without thinking of his voice. I think Claire needs us to be a certain kind of family. Like, she needs the Brannick story to be a specific story, and she's the one writing it, and the rest of us are, I don't want to say characters. We're real. She loves us, but she loves us inside a frame, and the frame is hers. And if you try to step outside the frame, she'll just adjust the story until you're back inside it. He paused. I could hear him breathing. Dara asked me if I've ever told Claire any of this, and I said no, and she asked why, and I said because Claire would make it into a story about how close we are, that I'd share something like that with her, and then it would become another brick in the wall of the Brannick family narrative. And I just want to talk to my sister like a person, not like a narrator. I stopped the recording. I set the phone on my nightstand. I turned off the light. I lay in the dark for a long time. The word he used was narrator, not sister, not Claire. Narrator. I want to tell you that I immediately understood what he meant. I want to tell you that I heard my brother's honest assessment of me, and I absorbed it with grace and self-awareness. But I am trying not to perform anymore. So I will tell you what actually happened. I got angry. I lay in my bed and I was angry at my dead brother for describing me in a way that I recognized as accurate and could not accept. I didn't listen to the next recording for 3 days. When I did, it was because I couldn't stay away. Not from Kyle. From the version of myself that Kyle had described. I needed to hear more. The way you need to keep touching a bruise. I needed to know how bad it was. It was not bad. That's the thing. That's what made it so much harder than if it had been bad. Kyle didn't hate me. Kyle didn't resent me. Kyle loved me. This was obvious in every recording. The way love is obvious in someone who has spent a long time thinking carefully about the person they love. He understood me. He understood the family. He understood the machinery of the Brannick story, how it was built, who maintained it, what function it served, and he had opted out. Not dramatically, not confrontationally, quietly, gradually over years. He had built a life that the family narrative couldn't reach, and he had done it so gently that none of us noticed. The voice notes were the record of that life. Kyle and Dara had been together for 3 years. Not dating and together. Living together in his apartment over the shop. She had moved in 16 months before he died. They had a cat named Sprocket. They cooked dinner together most nights. She was a large animal vet who worked with farms in Fayette County. She was, in Kyle's recordings, the most present person in his life. He talked to her or about her in nearly every note. I did not know any of this. I knew about Dara. I knew she existed. I knew her name. When Kyle mentioned her, I filed her under Kyle's friend, possibly more, and I didn't ask follow-up questions. I told myself this was respecting his privacy. The voice note suggested a different explanation. Recording 51. Kyle is on a walk. I can hear gravel under his feet and birds. Claire asked me yesterday if I was seeing anyone, and I said sort of, and she said, Kyle, you have to bring her to Thanksgiving. And I said, maybe, and she said, it'll be great. Mom will love her. And the whole conversation was already planned. In Claire's head, bringing Dara to Thanksgiving is a scene in the Brannick story. Dara walks in, Mom hugs her, Dad makes a bad joke. Claire observes it all and turns it into a post about how our family welcomes people. And I can't hand Dara over to that. Dara is mine. Not mine like property, mine like she's real, she's the realest thing. And I know what happens when real things enter Claire's story. They get shaped. They get captioned. I should tell you something about that Thanksgiving. Kyle did not bring Dara. He came alone. He was quiet. I posted a photograph of him at the table, mid-reach for the mashed potatoes with the caption, "Thankful for this one." It got 112 reactions. Kyle never commented on it, and I didn't notice that he never commented on it because I was counting the reactions. The recordings continued. 50, 60, 70. Kyle's life unfolded in his own voice, in his own frame. His work, his relationship, his friendships. He had friends I'd never met, a weekly poker game, a hiking group that went out on Saturdays. He was teaching himself to weld. He was thinking about starting a small business doing custom metalwork. Dara was encouraging him. They talked about getting a dog. He was happy. That's what the recordings documented more than anything. Not a complicated happiness, not a fraught happiness. The straightforward happiness of a person who has found the people and the work that fit him and is building something with them. And I knew almost none of it. Not because Kyle hid it, because I never entered the space where it was happening. I stayed in the Brannick narrative, family dinners, holidays, the curated calls, and Kyle stayed in his real life. And the distance between the two was 3 years and 143 recordings wide. Recording 88, December. Kyle's voice is different. Slower, more careful. He's been to the doctor. Something about headaches. The doctor isn't worried, but has ordered a scan. Kyle isn't worried either, but he's telling the phone about it because the phone is where he puts the things he's thinking about. I haven't told Mom or Dad. I haven't told Claire. If I tell Claire, it becomes a crisis, even if it's nothing. Because Claire's version of crisis is, she's good at crisis. She's built for it. She'll call every day and send articles and organize a meal train before I've even gotten the results back. And if it turns out to be nothing, the crisis will still have happened. Because in Claire's story, the crisis happened and she was there for it. And that's the point. The scan was clear. The headaches were tension headaches. Kyle mentioned this in recording 90 and never brought it up again. But I sat with recording 88 for a week. I replayed it over and over. Not because it was shocking, because it was precise. Kyle had described, in 45 seconds. The exact mechanism by which I process other people's lives. I absorb them into a narrative that centers my response. Someone is sick. I am there. Someone is struggling. I show up. Someone dies. I grieve. Publicly, thoroughly, with eloquence and visible pain. And the person themselves, the actual sick person, the actual struggling person, the actual dead person, becomes the occasion for my presence rather than the subject of their own experience. Kyle knew this. He had known it for years. And rather than confront me with it, which would itself have become a scene in my story, the time Kyle and I had an honest conversation about our dynamic, which I would have processed and narrated and turned into evidence of our closeness, he simply stepped outside the frame. He built a life I couldn't narrate because I didn't know it existed. I started going through the later recordings faster. Not because I wanted to, because I couldn't stop. The bruise was the size of my entire self-image now, and I was pressing on it with both hands. Recording 103 February. Kyle and Dara are talking about the future. He's describing a piece of property in Fayette County near one of Dara's farms. A small acreage with an old barn. He wants to convert the barn into a workshop. Dara wants space for rescue animals. They're planning. I think about telling Claire sometimes about all of this, Dara, the property, the plans, and I know she'd be happy. She would genuinely be happy. Claire's not a bad person. Claire's not even a bad sister. She's a narrator. And narrators they need the story more than they need the people in it. And they don't know that about themselves. And if you tell them, they narrate the telling. Recording 119, June, 7 months before Kyle's phone would be returned to my parents in a plastic bag from the Westmoreland County Police. Kyle is in his apartment. It's late. Dara is asleep. He whispers this at the beginning. Dara's asleep, keeping it quiet. I had lunch with Claire today. She drove down from Pittsburgh. We went to that diner on 30 and she told me about her job and her apartment and her friends. And she asked about me and I told her things that are true. Work is good, the apartment's fine. And she was satisfied. And I watched her be satisfied. And I thought, this is as close as we get. Not because I won't let her closer. Because the space between us is made of her stories about us, and I can't get through them, and she can't see past them, and we are two people who love each other across a distance that neither of us built on purpose. He paused. I'm going to set something up. I want her to meet Dara properly. Not at Thanksgiving. Not inside the family production, just dinner. The three of us. I want to see if Claire can be in a room with my actual life without turning it into her version of my life. I don't remember this lunch. I've tried to remember it. I've gone through my own texts, my own calendar. I found the entry. June 14th, lunch with Kyle, Route 30 Diner. I posted about it that evening. Brother date. This kid. With a photograph I took of him across the table, looking down at his menu. He never set up the dinner. He died 3 months later. I know why he never set it up. The voice notes don't say why, but I know. He listened to himself, described the plan. Bring Claire into the real life. See if she can inhabit it without narrating it. And he knew. He knew I couldn't. Not because I'm incapable, but because the narrative is structural. It's how I process reality. I can't turn it off any more than he could turn off his ability to hear a failing compressor across a room. Kyle died and I became the narrator of his death. and I was the best narrator his death could have had. I was eloquent and consistent and present. I held the family together. I was the voice of the Brannick grief, and the version of Kyle that I grieved, the private, quiet, loyal brother who showed up when you needed him and didn't ask for much, was true. It was also approximately 1/5 of who he was. I learned the other 4/5 from a phone. The last ordinary recording is number 141, September 9th, 6 days before the accident. Kyle is in his car. He's driving. I can hear the road. Talk to Dara about the Claire thing again. She said, I should stop protecting Claire from Claire. She said, your sister is 34 years old and she's going to find out who you actually are at some point. And it's better if it comes from you alive than from your stuff after you're dead. And I said, that's dark. And she said, I'm a vet. Everything's dark. I love her. I'm going to call Claire this weekend. He didn't call. He died on a Tuesday. Recording 142 was made on September 14th, the day before the accident. It's 11 seconds long. Kyle's voice quick, a note to self. Call Claire. For real this time, Sunday. Recording 143. The metadata says March 15th, 6 months and 1 day after Kyle's funeral. When I first saw the date, I felt what I imagine everyone who reads the title of this account expects me to feel: a cold, lurching dislocation, the feeling of the impossible, sitting calmly in a file directory. March. My brother was buried in September. His phone has been in my possession since November. It has been sitting on my nightstand, plugged in because I couldn't bear to let it die. And on March 15th, 6 months after his funeral, a new voice note appeared in the app. I stared at it for 20 minutes before I pressed play. I should tell you, I need to tell you, that in those 20 minutes I constructed an entire narrative, a ghost story. My dead brother reaching across whatever boundary death establishes, using the only technology he trusted, his own voice, his own phone, to send a final message. I composed the social media post in my head. I am not proud of this, but I am trying to be honest. In the 20 minutes between seeing the recording and pressing play, I imagined how I would tell people about it. The arc, the emotional architecture, the narrator receiving one last gift from the dead. I pressed play. Kyle's voice. Clear, close to the microphone, the same way he sounded in every other recording. Not ghostly, not distant, not altered, just Kyle talking to his phone. Hey, Claire. So, this is weird, and I'm sorry if the timing is strange. I set this up through a service that Dara found. You schedule a message, and it sends on a specific date. I picked 6 months after, 6 months after whenever I die, which is a dark sentence to say out loud. But Dara says, I have to do this now because I'll keep putting it off if I don't, and she's right. I don't know when you're hearing this. I don't know if I've died at 31 or 61 or 91. I hope it's 91. I hope I called you that Sunday and we figured it out. And this message is arriving in a world where you've known Dara for decades and you've seen the barn and you've been part of my actual life for years. And this is just a funny artifact, an old recording from when I was young and scared. But in case it's not, in case I didn't get around to calling, or I called and it didn't go how I wanted, or something happened before I could try, I need to tell you some things. I love you. That's first. I love you, and I have always loved you. And nothing I'm about to say changes that. Claire, you are the most dedicated person I know. You are dedicated to the family in a way that none of the rest of us can match. When something happens to a Brannock, you are there, and you are visible, and you make it matter. You have a gift for that. You make things matter. But somewhere along the way, and I don't know when, I've tried to figure out when and I can't, you started mattering more than the things. The story of the family became more important than the family. Your grief became more important than the loss. Your presence at the crisis became the crisis. And I don't think you know you do this. I think you believe, I know you believe, that showing up and speaking and posting and organizing is love. And it is love. It's a kind of love. But it's love that takes up all the oxygen, Claire. And the rest of us have been breathing your version of us for so long that I don't think you've ever met us. You've never met Dara. You know about her, but you've never met her. You've never been to my apartment. You've never seen my shop. You've never asked me what I'm building. You've asked me how I'm doing. You ask every time we talk. But you ask it inside a story that already has an answer, and the answer is always about us, the Brannocks, the family, and never about me. I am a person, Claire, not a character in the Brannock story. I have a life that doesn't appear in your posts because I chose not to give it to you, because I was afraid of what you'd do with it. And that's on me. That's my failure. I should have been braver. I should have shown you the real thing and let you react to it instead of assuming your reaction. But I'm not brave, and I might not get brave in time, so I'm doing this instead. I'm leaving you a message from the future, from after. That's whenever after is. And I'm asking you to do something. Find Dara. Her last name is Maida. She works with Fayette County large animal practices. Find her and ask her to tell you about me. Not the me you know, the me she knows. Let her talk. Don't write it down. Don't post about it. Don't make it a story. Just listen. And then, this is the hard part. Step back from the family grief, from the memorial, from whatever structure you've built around my death. Step back and let there be silence, where your voice was, and see who steps into the silence. Because someone will, Claire. Someone who knew me differently, someone whose grief doesn't have an audience and doesn't know how to ask for one. Let them have the space. I know this is the worst thing I could ask you. I know your grief is real. And I know stepping back will feel like abandoning me. But Claire, you've been so loud about losing me that no one else can hear themselves miss me. And the person who misses me most, who's missing me right now, wherever now is for her, is someone you've never met, and she deserves a room to grieve and that isn't already full of your voice. I love you. I mean that. I love you the way I love a compressor that runs perfectly and doesn't know it's drowning out every other sound in the building. You are powerful and relentless and good. You are also very, very loud. Be quiet for a while. See what you hear. Okay, that's it. That's the message. Dara, if you're listening to this with her, I'm sorry I made you do the scheduling. Claire, if you've gotten this far without turning it into a story, I'm proud of you. I love you both. Different. Molecules the same amount, but different. You would understand that if you met each other. Okay, bye. The recording is 4 minutes and 38 seconds long. I have listened to it 11 times. I have not listened to it in 6 days. Because I am trying to decide what to do. And every time I listen, I make a different decision. Here is what I have done since hearing it. I found Dara Mehta. She lives in the apartment above the shop. She still has Sprocket. She has been grieving my brother for 6 months. in near total solitude because she was not listed as a family contact, was not acknowledged at the funeral, was not mentioned in the obituary I wrote, or the eulogy I gave, or any of the 37 social media posts I have written about Kyle's death. She came to the funeral. She sat in the back. She left before the reception. I did not notice her because I was at the front of the room speaking. I went to her apartment. I knocked on the door. She opened it and she looked at me, and I saw in her face the exhaustion of a person who has been invisible inside someone else's story for 6 months. "I'm Claire," I said. "I know who you are," she said. She let me in. The apartment was small and warm and full of Kyle in a way that our parents' hall table drawer was not. His jacket on the hook, his boots by the door. A welding project on the workbench that I could see through the kitchen window. Half finished, a metal sculpture of something I couldn't identify. Sprocket, a gray cat with a torn ear, sitting on the couch with the confidence of an animal who has not been displaced. Dara made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table. She did not ask me why I had come because I think Kyle had told her about the scheduled message. She had been waiting. "He was going to call you," she said. "That Sunday. He talked about it all week. He was nervous." "I know, I heard the recordings." She looked at me. "All of them?" "All of them." "Then you know." "I know he loved you. I know he lived here. I know I never asked." Dara held her coffee with both hands, and she looked at the workbench through the window and she said, "He wasn't hiding from you, Claire. He was just living. And your version of his life didn't have room for his actual life. He couldn't figure out how to make it fit." I want to tell you that I responded with grace, that I heard her, that I absorbed it, that I was the kind of person who could sit in a dead brother's kitchen with the woman he loved and accept a correction to the central story of my life. What I said was, I was there for him. And Dara said, "I know you were. You were there for him every holiday and every phone call and every post. You were there for the Kyle in your story. He just wasn't sure that Kyle was him." We sat together for 2 hours. Dara told me things about Kyle that I will not reproduce here. Not because they are private, although they are, but because I am trying to honor the last instruction my brother gave me. He said, "Don't write it down." He said, "Don't make it a story." I am aware that I'm writing this down. I'm aware that this entire account is, in some sense, exactly the thing Kyle warned me about. The narrator narrating the discovery that she's a narrator. I am aware that there is no version of this that I can tell without telling it, and that telling it is the thing he asked me to stop doing. But I'm telling it once, this once, and then I'm going to try to do what he asked. I have not posted about Kyle in 3 weeks. This is the longest I've gone since his death. My mother has called twice to ask if I'm okay. My father sent a text that said, "Everything all right? You've been quiet." My cousin Sarah messaged me to say she misses my posts about Kyle, that they helped her process the loss. The silence is the loudest thing I've ever sat inside. And into the silence, slowly, other people are becoming audible. My mother told me last week, haltingly, over the phone, about a dream she'd had about Kyle. A small, strange, specific dream that she has never shared with me before because I think my narration of the grief occupied the entire frequency and there was no room for her small, strange, specific dream. My father mentioned at dinner that he's been going to Kyle's grave on Thursday afternoons. I did not know this. He's been doing it since October. He didn't tell me because he didn't say this, but I know, boss, because telling me would have turned it into a post, a story, a brick in the narrative. Dara called me last week. She asked if I wanted to see the barn, the property in Fayette County, the one Kyle talked about in the recordings. She hasn't bought it, she can't afford it alone. But she drives out there sometimes and sits in the car and looks at it. I said yes, and we drove out together on Saturday. Because the barn is real, red, tilting, the kind of structure that looks like it's in the process of deciding whether to stand or fall. The acreage is small and overgrown. There's a creek on the east side. Dara parked on the shoulder, and we sat in her truck and looked at it, and she said he wanted to put the workshop on the south side where the light's best. I didn't say anything. I sat there. I let the barn be a barn and not a metaphor. I let Dara's grief be next to mine without narrating the difference. I let the silence hold the space that my voice would normally fill. It lasted about 45 seconds before I felt the pull, the almost physical urge to say something, to frame it, to turn the moment into a story I could carry and give to someone else. I felt it the way Kyle described hearing a compressor. Instantly, instinctively, the diagnostic part of me already composing the caption. Took a drive with someone my brother loved. Saw the future he was building. Some things don't need words. Even the decision not to narrate was becoming a narrative. I closed my eyes. I listened to the truck's engine ticking as it cooled. I listened to Dara breathing next to me. I listened to the nothing that was actually everything. The creek and the wind and the meadow and the absence of my brother in a place he wanted to be. I don't know if I can do what Kyle asked. I don't know if a narrator can stop narrating. I don't know if the structure goes all the way down, if it's how I'm built, or if it's a habit I can unlearn with enough silence and enough time. I know that I have a folder on my phone with 143 voice notes that belong to a person I thought I knew and didn't. I know that the version of my brother I eulogized, the private, quiet, loyal Brannick kid, was real but incomplete. And the incomplete version was comfortable for me because it fit the story, and the complete version would have required me to be a listener instead of a narrator, and I've never in my life been a listener. I know that Dara Mehta is a real person who loved my brother for 3 years and has been grieving in silence because my voice filled every room his death touched. I know that Kyle sent a message to send 6 months after he died because he understood that it would take me that long to stop performing the immediate grief and start being still enough to hear something I didn't want to hear. He was right. He was right about the timing, and he was right about me. And he was right that I would turn even this, even the message, even the correction, into a story. But here's what I'm going to try. I'm going to finish this. I'm going to put it somewhere. And then I'm going to call Dara, and I'm going to ask her about Kyle, and I'm going to listen, and I'm not going to write it down. The Kyle she tells me about will exist only in the hearing, only in the air between us. And when the conversation is over, it will be gone. And I will have no post, no caption, no narrative, and no record. Just the memory of sitting still while someone else talked about the person we both lost. Kyle said, "Be quiet and see what you hear." I'm hearing him. For the first time. Not his voice on the phone. I've had that for months. I'm hearing what he was saying inside the recordings. Underneath the words, the thing he was trying to tell me for years without telling me, because telling me would have just been more material. The thing is this, I loved my brother and I missed him while he was alive. I missed him at every dinner and every phone call and every holiday because I was so busy narrating the Brannick family that I never once sat across from him and let him be a person I didn't already have a story about. He's dead. I can't fix it. I can't go back to the diner in June and say, Kyle, tell me about Dara. Tell me about the barn. Tell me about the welding. Tell me about the book about refrigeration. Tell me about you. I can't ungive the eulogy. I can't unwrite the posts. I can't return the 11 minutes of public speaking that I gave the funeral when those 11 minutes could have been silence, and in the silence, Dara might have stood up, and the room might have heard from the person who actually knew him. The recording is on the phone. I haven't deleted it. I haven't shared it. It sits in the app between recording 142, Call Claire, for real this time, Sunday, and the silence that follows it, which is the silence of a phone that has finished saying everything its owner needed to say. I charge the phone every night. Not because I need it to stay on. Because Kyle asked me to find Dara and I found her. And he asked me to step back, and I'm trying, and the least I can do is keep the battery alive on the device that holds the only version of my brother I never got to meet. Tomorrow is Thursday. My dad will be at the grave in the afternoon. I'm going to go. I'm not going to tell him I'm coming. I'm going to sit next to him on the bench, and I'm not going to say anything, and I'm going to see if he talks. And if he doesn't talk, I'm going to see if the silence is enough. Kyle said, I'm like a compressor. Powerful, relentless, good at what I do, drowning out every other sound in the building. I'm trying to learn how to shut off. The building is so quiet when I do. I had no idea how much was in here.